The rain fell like forgotten promises on the windshield of the car that stole my sight. I gripped the steering wheel too late, the world exploding into white-hot silence. And when the darkness settled, it was not just the light that had vanished, but the fragile map of my life. In that endless black, I whispered to the empty air, "This is the end of seeing you," and meant every lover, every dawn, every stolen glance that had ever made my heart ache with want. Evelyn Harper had always chased the horizon. Born in the fog-shrouded streets of Portland, Oregon, where the Willamette River carved secrets through the city's underbelly, she grew up sketching the curve of women's shoulders in the steam of coffee shops and the haze of indie film screenings. At 32, she was a freelance illustrator, her days filled with the sharp lines of urban sketches and nights tangled in the arms of lovers who came and went like seasonal rains. But that collision on a slick autumn highway 5 months ago changed everything. The doctors called it traumatic optic neuropathy, a clinical term for the thief that crept in and painted her world eternal night. Evelyn woke in the hospital to a beeping void, her hands fumbling for the edges of her bed, her voice cracking as she asked the nurse, "Can you describe the color of the walls?" The woman hesitated, then murmured something about pale blue. But the words dissolved like smoke, leaving Evelyn adrift in a sea without shores. The first weeks blurred into a haze of rehabilitation sessions and pitying glances she could no longer see but felt like weights on her chest. Her apartment in the Pearl District, once a vibrant chaos of canvases and half-empty wine bottles, became a minefield of shadows. She stubbed her toe on the leg of her drafting table, the one where she had drawn the portrait of her last love, a fleeting affair with a barista named Lena whose laugh echoed like wind chimes. Lena had stayed for 2 weeks after the accident, her touches tentative, her kisses laced with the unspoken question, "How do you love what you cannot see?" One morning Evelyn heard the door click shut for the last time, the scent of Lena's lavender shampoo lingering like a ghost. "I can't be your eyes, Ev," Lena had said over the phone the night before, her voice breaking, "and you deserve someone who can." Evelyn had nodded into the darkness, tasting salt on her lips, and replied, "I deserve nothing now." Grief settled into her bones like the damp chill of Oregon's endless drizzle. She stopped going to the markets where vendors hawked fresh lavender and sourdough, stopped wandering the bridges at dusk to watch the city lights fracture on the water. Her fingers, once deft with charcoal, now trembled when she reached for her sketchpad, the blank pages mocking her with their emptiness. What was the point of lines when the world was reduced to echoes and textures? Friends called, their voices filtered through concern, offering rides or audiobooks or just a chat. But Evelyn withdrew, curling into the worn armchair by the window, listening to the rain patter against the glass like impatient fingers. She imagined the drops racing down, each one carrying away the fragments of who she used to be. The woman who flirted with strangers in dive bars, who danced barefoot in summer festivals under strings of fairy lights, who believed love was a vivid spectrum of colors painted across bare skin. Nights were the worst. Sleep evaded her, chased away by the phantom flashes of that highway, the screech of tires, the jolt of impact, the bloom of blood behind her eyes. She would lie awake, tracing the scars on her arms from the wreckage, wondering if the universe had decided she was too greedy for beauty. "Why me?" she murmured to the ceiling one dawn, her voice hoarse from disuse. The answer came not in words but in the hollow ache of her chest, a reminder that sight was not the only thing lost. Love, too, had slipped away, elusive as the horizon she could no longer chase. Evelyn had always found solace in women's eyes, the way they crinkled with secrets, the depth that pulled her in like a tide. Now, without that anchor, she felt unmoored, adrift in a body that betrayed her at every turn. Her therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Miriam Hale, urged her toward adaptation classes at the local center for the visually impaired. Evelyn resisted at first, the idea of learning to navigate with a cane feeling like surrender. But the isolation gnawed deeper, and one gray morning, she hailed a cab to the sessions, her heart pounding as the driver described the route in halting detail. The center smelled of fresh coffee and printer ink, voices overlapping in a symphony of resilience she invaded. There she learned the tap-tap of the white cane against pavement, the subtle vibrations that signaled curbs or doorways. It was humiliating, exhilarating, a dance with invisibility. Yet even as her body began to map the world anew through sound and touch, her soul lagged behind, shrouded in the fog of what-ifs. One evening, after a particularly grueling class where she had knocked over a stack of chairs in a mock kitchen, Evelyn returned home to find a letter in Braille from her mother, slipped under the door by a neighbor. Clara Harper, a retired schoolteacher from the suburbs of Beaverton, wrote of wildflowers blooming along the Columbia River Gorge, of how the petals unfurled without needing eyes to witness their glory. "You are still the light in my days, my girl," the dots spelled out. Evelyn traced them with trembling fingers, tears carving paths down her cheeks. For the first time since the accident, a sliver of warmth pierced the faint memory of her mother's garden, where as a child she had buried secrets in the soil and unearthed them as blooms. Perhaps, she thought, there was soil enough for her own buried hopes. But hope was a fragile seed easily crushed. That night, a storm rolled in from the coast, thunder rumbling like distant regrets. Evelyn paced her apartment, the cane forgotten in the corner, her mind replaying the wreckage. She had been driving to meet a client, her portfolio clutched on the passenger seat, sketches of a coastal inn in Seaside. The other car, a delivery truck hydroplaning on black ice, had crossed the median without warning. The driver walked away with scratches. Evelyn lost the canvas of her life. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, she sank to the floor, knees drawn to her chest, and whispered, "I am done chasing." The words hung in the air, heavy as lead, sealing her resolve to let go not just of sight, but of the vibrant, aching world of connection she had once known. As autumn deepened into winter, Evelyn's world contracted further. She quit her freelance work, the emails piling up unread, her savings a thinning buffer against the void. Friends drifted, their invitations met with polite declines, until the silence of her apartment became a companion she both loathed and clung to. She spent hours by the radio, tuning into old jazz stations where women's voices crooned of lost loves and midnight rendezvous, their tones wrapping around her like smoke. In those melodies, she glimpsed echoes of her past, the way Sadie's fingers had traced her spine in a loft overlooking the East Bank Esplanade, or how ice's breath had warmed her neck during a weekend in the Oregon dunes. Those memories, once treasures, now twisted like thorns, reminding her that touch without sight felt incomplete, a half-finished sketch. Dr. Hale noticed the withdrawal in their sessions, her voice gentle but probing. "Tell me about the last time you felt truly seen," she said one afternoon, the center's heater humming softly in the background. Evelyn hesitated, the question stirring sediment in her chest. "Before," she replied finally. "It was in a woman's gaze across a crowded room, the way her eyes held mine, like she was memorizing the shape of my soul." The doctor nodded, though Evelyn heard only the rustle of papers. "And now?" Evelyn's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Now I'm just a shadow waiting for the light to forget me." The breaking point came on a crystalline December morning, when the city awoke to a rare frost. Evelyn ventured out for groceries, her cane slicing through the brittle air, each step a negotiation with the ice-slick sidewalks. She made it to the corner store, the bells jingling like brittle warnings, and filled her basket with canned soups and bread that smelled faintly of yeast. On the way back, disaster struck. A child on a skateboard, veering wildly from an alley, collided with her at the crosswalk. The basket flew, cans rolling like escaped marbles, and Evelyn tumbled, her palm slicing open on the frozen grate. Pain bloomed sharp and immediate, but it was the laughter from onlookers that cut deepest, disembodied chuckles filtering through the chill, as if her fall was a punchline in a cruel comedy. She lay there for what felt like eternities, blood warm against the cold concrete, until a stranger's hands, gentle, calloused, helped her up. "Easy now," a man's voice said, but Evelyn recoiled, batting away the aid. "I can manage," she snapped, though her voice trembled. He persisted, guiding her to a bench, fetching her scattered items. Gratitude warred with humiliation as she thanked him, her cheeks burning. That night, alone with her bandaged hand, the dam broke. Sobs racked her body, raw and unrelenting, until exhaustion claimed her on the kitchen floor. In the depths of that despair, a whisper surfaced. "This cannot be the end. Not like this." The decision crystallized in the pale light of pre-dawn. Evelyn called her mother, the phone cord twisting like veins in her grip. "I need to get away, Mom. Somewhere quiet where I can breathe." Clara's response was immediate, laced with the quiet strength of roots. Come to the cabin in the Cascades. It's been empty too long. The garden's there waiting for you. The cabin, a weathered A-frame nestled in the foothills near Mount Hood, had been her father's retreat before his passing a decade ago. Evelyn hadn't visited since, the memories too tangled with loss. But now loss was her constant, and perhaps in that familiarity, she could unravel it. Packing was a ritual of release. She folded clothes into a duffel, fingers lingering on the silk scarf Lena had left behind, then let it fall to the donation pile. Books on tape joined her, along with a portable speaker for music that swelled like waves. The drive north was entrusted to a rideshare service, the driver a chatty woman named Josie who described the passing scenery, the snow-capped peaks glowing pink, the evergreens heavy with rhyme as if Evelyn were a child again, wide-eyed at wonders. Gratitude softened the edges of her anxiety, and by the time they turned onto the gravel drive, Evelyn felt the first stirrings of possibility, faint as a pulse beneath frost. The cabin smelled of pine and dust, the air crisp with the bite of mountain winter. Clara had stocked the fridge and left a note in large print Evelyn scanned with her phone app. The gardens out back are yours. Plant something new. Evelyn smiled through tears, the words a balm. She spent the first day mapping the space cane in hand, memorizing the creak of floorboards, the slant of door frames, the way sunlight slanted through windows to warm patches on the rug. Evenings brought crackling fires, the wood smoke curling like thoughts she couldn't quite grasp. But it was the garden that called to her. Buried behind the cabin, it sprawled wild and untended, a tangle of overgrown roses and ferns reclaiming the paths her father had laid. Evelyn ventured out on the third day, bundled in wool, the cold nipping at her cheeks. The ground yielded underfoot, soft with decay and promise, and she knelt, letting soil sift through her fingers, black, loamy, alive. She planted bulbs by touch, tulips and daffodils, their papery skins whispering of spring and the voices of strangers' hands that had harvested them. As she patted the earth smooth, a sound drifted on the wind, a woman's voice, low and melodic, singing an old folk tune about rivers and redemption. Evelyn froze, heart stuttering. The voice came from beyond the hedge, carried on the breeze like a secret. It was rich, unhurried, wrapping around the notes with a warmth that thawed something deep within her. She listened, breath held, until the song faded into the rustle of leaves. Who was she? A neighbor perhaps, tending her own plot. Evelyn rose slowly, soil clinging to her palms, and for the first time in months, the darkness felt less like a prison and more like a veil, thin enough to pierce with sound. The voice lingered in Evelyn's mind like the aftertaste of honey, sweet and elusive. She returned to the garden daily, drawn by the pull of that melody, her hands sinking deeper into the earth as if to root herself against the unraveling. The cabin provided a fragile shelter, its walls echoing with the ghosts of family summers' laughter around the grill, her father's gravelly stories of logging days in the valleys below. But solitude amplified the fractures within her. Mornings brought vertigo spells, the world tilting in her ears, and she would grip the counter until the nausea passed, whispering affirmations Dr. Hale had taught her. I am here. I am whole. Yet wholeness felt like a lie. Letters arrived from Portland creditors, gentle at first, then insistent, tallying the months her illustrations had gone unsold. Evelyn dictated responses via voice app. Her words clipped, promising payments from a future she couldn't envision. Sleep fractured into nightmares of highways and shattering glass, waking her with sheets twisted like restraints. One night, thunder rolled down from the peaks, lightning cracking the sky though she saw only the strobe of white behind her lids. She stumbled to the porch, rain soaking her nightshirt, and screamed into the storm, the sound raw, primal, a release of all the unshed fury. Take it back, she raged, fists pounding the railing until splinters bit her skin. The tempest answered with wind that whipped her hair, but offered no mercy, only the cold truth that some losses were irrevocable. In the garden's quiet aftermath, Evelyn sought solace in routine. She harvested what remained of the late herbs, rosemary sharp as memory, thyme soft as regret, crumbling them into stews that filled the cabin with savory warmth. The radio became her companion, tuned to a station from Hood River broadcasting local tales of resilience, farmers rebuilding after floods, artists finding muse in the wild. Their stories wove through her days, Threads of hope she clutched like lifelines. But doubt gnawed persistent, whispering that her own tale was one of diminishment, not triumph. A package arrived mid-January, forwarded from the city, a box of her old sketchbooks, sent by a former colleague named Theo. Inside, pages rustled under her fingertips, the raised edges of pencil strokes evoking faces she had captured. A jazz singer mid-note, her lips parted in ecstasy. A lover's silhouette against a sunset harbor. Evelyn traced them for hours, tears blurring the braille labels she added later. These were artifacts of a self she mourned, vibrant and sighted, who had believed in the alchemy of line and shadow to bind hearts. Now they mocked her stillness, a gallery of what was. Despair crested on a day when fog blanketed the mountains, muffling sounds until the world felt underwater. Evelyn attempted a walk along the deer trail behind the cabin, cane probing the underbrush, but disorientation struck swift and merciless. Branches snagged her coat, roots tripped her steps, and panic bloomed hot in her throat. She called out, voice echoing back unanswered, until she collapsed against a tree, sobs heaving. Hours passed, or minutes. Time dissolved in the gray. A rustle finally parted the haze, footsteps, deliberate, then a voice not the singer's but Clara's, alerted by a worried neighbor. "Oh, Evie," her mother murmured, arms enveloping her in wool and lavender. They made their way back in silence, Evelyn leaning into the familiar rhythm of Clara's gait. That evening, over chamomile tea steaming gently on the table, Clara broached the unspoken. "You're fighting a war inside, aren't you?" Evelyn nodded, cup warm between palms. "Every day. And am losing." Clara's hand covered hers, steady as bedrock. "Loss isn't the enemy, darling. It's the soil. What grows from it, that's the battle worth winning." They talked late into the night, Evelyn unspooling the tangle of guilt over the accident. Had she been distracted by a text from Lena? Clara listened without judgment, sharing her own shadows after Evelyn's father died of a sudden heart attack on a logging site, leaving her to raise a grieving daughter alone. "I thought love had died with him," Clara confessed. "But it shifts, Evie. It finds new shapes." Inspired, Evelyn resolved to tend more than the garden. She ordered seeds by mail, hyacinths for sorrow, forget-me-nots for remembrance, their packets textured, promising. Planting became meditation, knees sunk in mud, fingers parting earth to cradle each fragile life. The singer's voice returned sporadically, fragments of songs drifting like pollen. A lullaby on windless afternoons, a hymn at dusk that stirred Evelyn's chest with inexplicable longing. She never sought the source, afraid to shatter the spell, but it anchored her, a beacon in the fog. Yet breakdown loomed inevitable. February brought blizzards that buried the trails, isolating the cabin in white silence. Power flickered, then failed, plunging Evelyn into a darkness doubled. She fumbled for candles, matches slipping from numb fingers, until one caught, flame dancing like a hesitant lover. In its glow she confronted the mirror for the first time since Portland, fingers outlining the glass, imagining the woman reflected. Hollow-cheeked, eyes distant as storm clouds. "Who are you?" she whispered, voice cracking. The flame guttered, shadows leaping, and in that play of light and dark, Evelyn saw not defeat, but the raw edge of transformation, a chrysalis cracking. The storm passed, but its echo lingered in feverish dreams where she ran through forests, sight restored, only to awaken to the same void. Isolation festered, turning inward. She snapped at Clara's check-in calls, her tone barbed with exhaustion. One afternoon, attempting to bake bread from memory, she burned the loaf black, smoke acrid as failure. She hurled the pan into the sink, shards of ceramic flying, one nicking her cheek. Blood trickled warm and she slid down the cabinets, curling, fetal whispers escaping. "I can't. I just can't." In that nadir, memory surfaced unbidden, the accident not as tragedy, but pivot. The truck driver had visited the hospital, his voice thick with remorse, describing how head swerved to avoid a deer, fate intersecting cruelly. Evelyn had forgiven him then, words automatic, but resentment simmered unspoken, a poison she now recognized. Forgiveness, she realized, was not absolution given but change shed. Kneeling amid the wreckage of her kitchen, she voiced it aloud. "I release you. And me." The words hung, tentative, but the air lightened fractionally, as if the cabin exhaled with her. Spring teased early that year. crocuses piercing the snow like defiant stars. Evelyn emerged frilier but fiercer, her walks extending to the meadows where meltwater sang over stones. The singer's voice grew bolder, verses clearer, weaving tales of lost loves reclaimed. Evelyn hummed along once, her own tone rusty, and felt a spark ignite connection, however distant. Clara visited, bearing bulbs and books, her presence a bridge to the world beyond. "He's hearing you grow," she said of Evelyn's father, eyes misty. Evelyn squeezed her hand, the gesture laden with unspoken vows. As March unfolded, Evelyn experimented with voice recordings, narrating the garden's progress for a blog she started tentatively. Descriptions of petal textures velvet soft, of birdsong layering like harmonies. Responses trickled in, voices from afar echoing her journey, their empathy a tapestry she wove into armor. But the true unraveling came internally, layers peeling to reveal the core wound. Not the blindness but the fear that love in all its forms required sight to flourish. One twilight, as she weeded the rosebeds, thorns pricking like reminders, Evelyn heard the voice near. Words forming a conversation with the wind or herself, about scars that bloom into strength. Heart pounding, she called out softly, "Hello." Silence answered, then footsteps retreating. The encounter left her breathless, yearning coiling tight. In the cabin's lamplight that night, she penned a letter to Lena, not to send, but to purge. Gratitude for the light shared, sorrow for the timing fractured. Burning it in the hearth, flames devouring ink. Evelyn felt the ashes settle light as forgiveness' first breath. The breakdown had peaked, but in its ruins reconstruction stirred. Evelyn's hands, dirt-etched, moved with purpose now, coaxing life from dormancy. The garden responded, shoots greening under her care, mirroring the tentative greening within. Yet doubt lingered, a shadow at the edges, whispering of voices that might never draw near. Still she tended onward, roots delving deeper, waiting for the bloom that promised more than survival rebirth. The garden became Evelyn's sanctuary, a living pulse against the cabin's stillness. April arrived with tentative sun, melting snow into rivulets that fed the soil, and with it came the first true meeting, not of bodies, but of echoes that reshaped her silence. She had taken to sitting on the weathered bench at dawn, cane propped beside her, listening to the world unfurl, dew dripping from ferns like liquid glass, chickadees trilling territorial claims. The singer's voice had evolved from phantom to presence, its cadence a rhythm Evelyn matched in her own humming, a bridge built of notes across the hedge. On a morning when mist clung low like a lover's breath, the voice emerged closer, words discernible now, spoken not sung. "There you are, you stubborn thing," it murmured, followed by the snip of shears against stem. Evelyn held still, pulse quickening, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed mint. Curiosity overrode caution. She rose, fingers trailing the hedge for guidance, and stepped through a gap where branches parted like an invitation. "Hello," she called again, softer this time, voice laced with the vulnerability of one who had learned to fear echoes. Footsteps paused, then resumed deliberate, approaching. "Over here," the voice replied, warm as sun-warmed stone, tinged with a drawl that hinted at southern roots transplanted north. Evelyn turned toward it, cane tapping lightly, until a hand gentle, earth-scented brushed her arm. "I'm Riley. Riley Voss. You're the new tenant at the old Harper place, aren't you?" Clara mentioned a daughter coming up from the city. Evelyn nodded, throat tight, and extended her hand. The clasp was firm yet yielding, calluses mapping stories of labor and care. "Evelyn. Yes, I've been planting." Riley's laugh was a cascade, light filtering through leaves. "I can see that. Or rather, the bulbs are shouting it from the rooftops. Hyacinths, right? Bold choice for a first season." They stood there, hands lingering a beat too long, the hedge rustling softly between them. Riley guided Evelyn to a patch of sun-dappled grass, describing her own garden as they sat. Rows of lavender bordering foxgloves, a trellis heavy with clematis that bloomed purple as twilight. Her words painted vivid, Evelyn drinking them in like parched earth after rain, the darkness receding fractionally under the vividness. Riley was 35. Evelyn learned over shared mugs of cider later that afternoon on the cabin porch. Born in the tobacco fields of North Carolina, she had fled at 18 for the pull of the West Coast, landing in the Cascades a decade ago after a string of diner jobs and fleeting romances. Now she tended the community plots in nearby government camp, her voice her trade as much as her hands leading workshops on native perennials, her songs a balm for weary souls. Gardens teach patience, Riley said, her tone reflective. You plant in faith, wait through the rot, and one day green breaks through. It's the closest thing to magic I've found. Evelyn shared fragments in return, the accident veiled in brevity, her sketches gathering dust in Portland. Riley's silence was attentive, not pitying, broken only by a soft hum of the folk tune Evelyn now recognized as Shenandoah. A river song of longing and return. As dusk deepened, fireflies winking in the meadow, Riley rose. Come back tomorrow if you like. I'll show you the bee balm. It hums like it's alive. Evelyn agreed, the promise lingering like the cider on her tongue. Their meetings unfolded like seasons, easing into one another. Mornings brought lessons in texture, Riley pressing oak leaves veined like rivers into Evelyn's palm, or velvet lamb's ear soft as whispered confessions. Afternoons wove stories. Riley's tales of Carolina summers, fireflies in jars and porch swings creaking under the weight of unspoken desires. Evelyn's memories of Portland rains, walking hand in hand with lovers along the esplanade, city lights blurring into constellations. Laughter threaded through, tentative at first, then free, Riley's drawl wrapping around Evelyn's sharper edges like ivy. Yet meetings stirred undercurrents, ripples of old wounds. Evelyn caught herself straining for cues, Riley's breath quickening at a shared joke, the brush of fingers accidental but electric. Fear coiled. Could connection thrive without the anchor of eyes? One evening, as they harvested raspberries, thorns nicking skin like memories, Riley paused, juice staining her lips. Tell me what you miss most, she said softly. Evelyn hesitated, then confessed. The way a woman's gaze could undress you soul first. Without that, I'm half a map. Riley's response was a touch to her wrist, thumb circling slow. Maps are redrawn, Evelyn. And some paths are felt, not seen. The bond deepened in quiet ways. Riley brought recordings of her songs, played on an old guitar, strings vibrating under Evelyn's fingertips as melodies filled the cabin. In return, Evelyn narrated her blog aloud, voice gaining strength, Riley's feedback a mirror reflecting growth. They cooked together wild mushroom risotto simmering with thyme, the steam carrying scents that evoked shared histories. Touches multiplied, incidental at first, then intentional. Riley's hand steadying Evelyn's on a garden trowel, Evelyn's shoulder leaning into Riley's during sunset vigils on the porch. Conflict simmered beneath, Evelyn's insecurities flaring like dry brush. A weekend storm trapped them indoors, rain lashing windows, and in the firelight's intimacy doubt spoke. You don't have to stay, Evelyn blurted during a lull in Riley's storytelling. Pity the blind girl in the woods. Riley's guitar stilled, strings humming protest. Pity? Darlin', you're the first person who's made silence feel full in years. She set the instrument aside, drawing Evelyn close, foreheads touching. The air hummed with unspoken want, but Evelyn pulled back, heart racing. I can't see you. How can you want this? Riley's voice was fierce, tender. I hear you. That's enough. As May bloomed riotous azaleas flaming pink along the trails, their rhythm solidified. Hikes became adventures, Riley describing vistas Evelyn internalized as symphonies. Wind through pines like cellos, distant waterfalls crashing cymbals. They spoke of loves past, Riley's heart scarred by a partner who mistook her wandering spirit for flight. Evelyn's string of connections frayed by her own chase for perfection. Empathy bridged gaps, Riley's drawl soothing Evelyn's sharp confessions. We carry our breaks like heirlooms, Riley mused one afternoon, as they picnicked amid lupins. But heirlooms can be polished. The meeting extended beyond the garden, into the fabric of days. Riley introduced Evelyn to her circle, a knit of locals at the Hood River Grange. Woodworkers with hands like roots, weavers spinning yarns of mountain lore. Their welcome was warm, voices overlapping in chorus, and Evelyn found her place, sharing readings from her blog to nods and claps that vibrated the floorboards. In those gatherings under rafters strung with dried herbs, she felt seen anew, not through eyes but presence. Yet the pull toward Riley intensified, a gravitational ache. Evenings ended with reluctance, Riley's goodbye lingering on the threshold, breath mingling. One night, under a canopy of stars Riley described as spilled diamonds, Evelyn reached out, fingers finding Riley's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, the touch a question. Riley's hand covered hers, holding. "For what starts here?" The moment stretched, electric, then released, leaving Evelyn breathless in the dark. Spring waned into summer's cusp, the garden a riot of color Evelyn perceived in symphonies of scent and sound. Bees droning basslines, petals unfurling sighs. Their connection mirrored it, vibrant, layered, alive. But beneath the bloom, Evelyn sensed the next threshold. Understanding the scars that bound them, forgiving the paths that had led to this fragile now. As fireweed flared along the meadows, Riley invited her to the solstice festival in town. A night of bonfires and songs. "Wear something flowy," she teased. Evelyn smiled, heart alight. The meeting had begun, now the dance. Summer draped the cascades in gold, sunlight sifting through canopies like grace notes in a symphony. Evelyn and Riley's worlds intertwined further, threads of shared silences and sudden confessions weaving a tapestry resilient as hemp. The solstice festival marked a turning, bonfires crackling under a velvet sky, locals circling with fiddles and flasks of elderflower cordial. Riley led Evelyn through the throng, her arm a steady compass describing the scene. Faces gilded in firelight, skirts swirling like flames, the air thick with wood smoke and wild mint. Evelyn laughed freely, the sound surprising her, as Riley's voice painted the chaos vivid. They found a spot by the largest blaze, heat kissing their skin, and Riley sang a cappella, her tone rising pure over the din, a ballad of two women bound by rivers, voices parting then converging. Evelyn listened, tears tracing silent paths, the lyrics mirroring her own odyssey. Afterward, hands clasped across the space between, Riley leaned in. "That one's for you," she murmured. Evelyn's reply was a squeeze, words unnecessary. The night unfolded in dances, Riley guiding her steps, bodies swaying to reels that pulsed like heartbeats until exhaustion claimed them on a quilt under stars. Dawn brought revelations, the festival a catalyst for deeper dives. Back at the cabin, over breakfast of foraged berries tart as truth, Riley broached her shadows. "I wasn't always this steady," she admitted, voice low. At 25, she'd loved fiercely a sculptor named Mara. Their life in a Seattle warehouse loft a whirlwind of clay-smeared kisses and midnight inspirations. But Mara's ambition pulled her east to galleries in New York, leaving Riley adrift, convinced her roots too deep, her dreams too small. "She said I was holding her back," Riley confessed, fingers twisting a napkin. "Truth was, I was terrified of flying with her." Evelyn absorbed it, empathy blooming warm. Her own tales followed, unspooling over hikes where waterfalls thundered approval. The accident not just theft of sight, but of agency. The guilt that she had survived when others in the pileup had not, a young mother, her child. "I forgave the driver," Evelyn said, voice steadying. "But not myself. For being there, for needing to rush." Riley's hand found hers on the trail, thumb tracing knuckles. "You were living, Ev. That's not a crime." Understanding deepened in gestures small yet profound. Riley taught her echolocation, clapping to map rooms, the bounce of sound revealing shapes like sonar kisses. In return, Evelyn shared her inner landscapes, dictating scenes from memory. A Portland sunset bleeding orange into the river, lovers' silhouettes etched black. They explored the garden's understory together, knees muddied, unearthing trillium blooms, Riley likening to hidden hearts. "See," she'd say, pressing one to Evelyn's palm. "Beauty waits to be felt." Conflicts arose, inevitable as summer storms. Evelyn's insecurities flared during a visit from Clara, who arrived with pies and probing questions. Observing Riley's easy attentiveness, Clara pulled Evelyn aside. "She's good for you, but are you ready?" Evelyn bristled, the query stirring old fears. That night alone, doubt whispered. Riley deserved wholeness, not fragments. She confronted it over coffee the next morning, voice trembling. "What if I'm too broken? What if this is pity dressed as care?" Riley's response was immediate, fierce. "Broken? You're the strongest soul I've met. And it's not pity, it's recognition. I see me in you, the parts we hide." Forgiveness emerged as the salve. They journeyed to Multnomah Falls one July day, the mist veiling them like confessionals. At the base, water roaring, Riley shared Mara's final letter, read aloud by Evelyn's app. "Words of regret too late. I held on to the hurt like a grudge, Riley said. Evelyn nodded, then voiced her own absolution. I forgive the road that took my eyes, and the me who blamed fate. They stood in the spray, hands linked, the cascade washing away residues, leaving clarity crisp as mountain air. Empathy flowered in vulnerability's soil. Riley confessed a recent wound, a brief entanglement with a hiker who'd mistaken her warmth for transience, vanishing after a week of trail-shared tents. I thought I'd learned, she said, voice cracking. Evelyn drew her close, murmuring, we learn by breaking and mending. That embrace lingered, bodies aligning, breath sinking, a threshold crossed into intimacy unspoken yet profound. August brought heat waves, the garden wilting then rebounding under their care. They harvested together zucchini swelling like secrets, tomatoes sun-ripened to burst. Evenings found them on the porch, Riley's guitar strumming lullabies, Evelyn's head on her shoulder, the world reduced to touch and tone. Understanding ripened. Love not as sight but sense, a mosaic of scars shared. A rift tested them mid-month, when Theo from Portland visited, bearing news of a group exhibit for blind artists. Your voice pieces, they'd fit, he urged. Evelyn hesitated, fear of exposure clawing. Riley encouraged, but Evelyn snapped. You don't get it, you can walk away. The words landed harsh, silence stretching taut. Riley left without retort, footsteps fading into dusk. Regret gnawed. Evelyn sought her at the community plots next dawn, cane tapping urgently. Riley was kneeling amid sunflowers, heads bowing like penitents. I'm sorry, Evelyn said, kneeling too, soil cool. Riley sighed, turning. I do get it. Fear makes us lash. But don't push me out because you're scared to step in. They talked through the morning, thorns of pride pricking until forgiveness bloomed mutual. Apologies exchanged like seeds. The exhibit loomed, a milestone. Riley helped prepare recordings, her voice layering harmonies behind Evelyn's narrations. Launch night in Hood River, Evelyn stood before the mic, heart thundering, describing her garden's rebirth as metaphor. Applause washed over her, Riley's hand in hers backstage at anchor. You shone, Riley whispered. Evelyn leaned in, lips brushing cheek. Because you lit the way. As leaves hinted at turning, understanding solidified. They forgave not just each other, but selves. Riley releasing the ghost of Mara, Evelyn absolving the womanhood driven that faded road. In a meadow ablaze with asters under equinox sun, they shared a kiss tentative, then deepening tasting of earth and elderberry, a vow etched in sensation. Empathy had bridged their worlds. Forgiveness cleared the path. Now the journey turned toward rebirth, the garden within stirring to life. Autumn gilded the cascades in amber and rust, leaves drifting like confetti from a ceremony long awaited. Evelyn's rebirth unfolded not in thunderclaps, but whispers of wind through aspen groves, each gust carrying away the husks of old selves. The kiss in the meadow had sealed it, a sacrament of lips and breath, igniting a fire that warmed without consuming. Their love bloomed deliberate, petals unfolding in the privacy of shared spaces. Mornings tangled in quilts, Riley's fingers mapping Evelyn's curves like Braille sonnets. Evenings where stories swapped places with silences, profound as prayer. Evelyn felt the shift in her core, a uncoiling. The cane, once a crutch of resentment, became an extension, tapping rhythms that synced with Riley's gait on forest paths. She resumed illustrating, not with eyes but intuition, dictating lines to apps that rendered tactile maps, raised ink tracing lovers' profiles, gardens in relief. Riley marveled at them, fingers following the swells. You create worlds I can touch, she said, awe threading her drawl. Evelyn smiled, the compliment rooting deeper than any bulb. Rebirth touched daily rhythms. They tended the garden as ritual, harvesting pumpkins swelling orange as sunsets, their hands brushing in the vines, a language of intent. Evelyn learned Riley's signatures. The hitch in her laugh when joy crested, the way her exhale softened post-kiss, like exhaling into home. In turn, Riley discovered Evelyn's tells, the tilt of her head when listening deep, the flutter of lashes against vulnerability. Love as salvation manifested in these intimacies, mending fractures with threads of trust. Challenges arose as rebirth demands labor. Evelyn's exhibit success drew inquiries. A Portland gallery proposing a solo show. Excitement warred with terror. The city loomed, a labyrinth of memories laced with loss. What if I falter? She confided one crisp October eve. As they walked the deer trail, acorns crunching underfoot, Riley stopped, turning her to face the imagined horizon. Then you lean on me. Rebirth isn't solo, Ev. It's us weaving stronger. Clara's visit brought affirmation. Arriving with cider and tales of Beaverton blooms, she sensed the change, hugging Evelyn tight. You're glowing from inside, she said then to Riley. You've been the rain to her roots. Over dinner stew simmering with rosemary they shared histories, Clara revealing her own late-blooming romance after Evelyn's father, a widow finding spark with the librarian at 60. Love waits, Clara said, eyes twinkling. Then it floods. Emboldened, Evelyn planned the city trip, Riley insisting on accompanying. The drive south was a descent into layered pasts, Josie's cab replaced by Riley's truck rumbling over passes. Portland greeted with rain-slick streets, scents of espresso and evergreens stirring ghosts. At the gallery, Evelyn navigated the space by voice and touch, narrating her pieces to murmurs of appreciation. Riley's presence grounded her, hand at elbow, whispers of encouragement like lifelines. The opening night climaxed in a reading, Evelyn's voice steady, evoking the garden's voice that had called her back to life. Applause swelled, mingled with tears. Afterward, in a quiet corner, Riley kissed her temple. You were born anew tonight. Return to the cabin brought integration. Evelyn's blog evolved, collaborations with Riley infusing posts with songs recorded in tandem, voices harmonizing over descriptions of frost-kissed ferns. Subscribers grew, their messages a chorus of kinship, women sharing tales of hidden strengths, loves rediscovered. Empathy extended outward. They volunteered at the center's workshops, Evelyn teaching sensory sketching, Riley leading soundscapes for navigation. In those sessions, Evelyn witnessed mirrors of her journey, participants tracing air with fingers, voices rising tentative then bold, and felt the ripple of her rebirth touching others. Intimacy deepened, a sacred unfolding. Nights by the hearth, Riley's stories gave way to explorations, fingers learning spines like rivers, breaths charting territories of skin. Love as redemption healed old scars, Evelyn forgiving her Bodas betrayal, Riley releasing fears of impermanence. They spoke dreams aloud. A joint greenhouse behind the cabin, workshops blending art and earth, travels to Carolina coasts, where Riley would describe magnolias heavy with bloom, Evelyn capturing their essence in verse. Winter's approach tested resilience. A late frost blackened the rosebuds, mirroring a gallery contract's delay that plunged Evelyn into doubt. Is this sustainable? She wondered aloud, voice small. Riley drew her to the window, where snow blanketed the garden soft. Seasons turn, love. Frost kills what's weak, what's rooted endures. They replanted, bulbs nestled deep, a metaphor made manifest. Rebirth crested in quiet epiphanies. One dawn, Evelyn woke to Riley's humming, the tune Shenandoah vibrating the air. She rose, following sound to the kitchen, where coffee brewed and pancakes sizzled. I see you, Evelyn said, not in sight but knowing, arms encircling from behind. Riley leaned back, content. And I you. As November veiled the mountains in white, Evelyn reflected on the arc. From wreckage to roots, wound to wonder. The darkness remained, but now it cradled light stars in memory. Riley's voice a constellation. Love had salvaged her, not as cure but companion, coaxing forth a self-resilient, radiant. The garden slept, but beneath life pulsed, awaiting spring's call. Rebirth was not endpoint, but becoming eternal. Winter wrapped the cabin in crystalline hush, snow muffling the world to a sacred whisper. Yet in that stillness light broke through, diffusing warmth like dawn on icicles. Evelyn and Riley's love, forged in earth's patient alchemy, now shone steady, illuminating paths once shrouded. Mornings began with Riley's voice rousing birdsong from the radio, blending with the sizzle of bacon, Evelyn's laughter threading the air as she navigated breakfast by scent and sound. Their days wove domestic grace, shoveling paths that crunched like fresh pages, tending indoor pots where herbs whispered green promises. The light manifested in expansions. Evelyn's gallery show evolved into a touring exhibit, pieces shipped to Seattle and beyond, her narrations recorded for virtual audiences. Responses flooded voices from coasts and heartlands, women echoing themes of visibility beyond eyes. A teacher in Montana blind from birth, finding love in braille letters. A veteran in Virginia, reclaiming joy through pottery wheels hum. Evelyn read them aloud by firelight, Riley's arm around her. The story's a constellation connecting their small world to vast kinship. "You're sparking something bigger," Riley said, pride lacing her tone. Evelyn kissed her palm. "We are." Forgiveness glow extended backward. Evelyn wrote to Lena, not with anger but grace, thanking her for the light shared, wishing her horizons anew. The reply came gentle, affirming the growth glimpsed even from afar. To the truck driver a call. "I hold no chains," she said, voice clear. His relief echoed down the line, a mutual release rippling outward. Riley, too, penned Mara closure without bitterness, burning the letter in a solstice rite, ashes scattering on wind like seeds. Spring 2026 arrived triumphant, the garden erupting in symphony. Daffodils trumpeting, yellow tulips cupping rain like chalices. They broke ground for the greenhouse, frames rising under local hands, glass panes catching sun like captured hopes. Inside, seedlings stirred under Riley's care, Evelyn's fingers testing soil moisture. Their partnership a harmony of nurture. Workshops bloomed their first, gatherings of souls seeking solace. Artists blind and sighted collaborating on sensory installations, gardeners sharing lore of resilient strains. Laughter filled the air, mingled with strings from Riley's guitar, Evelyn's readings weaving narrative threads. Love deepened into legacy. They planned a road trip south, tracing Riley's Carolina roots. Coastal drives where salt wind carried magnolia perfume, porches creaking under shared swings. Evelyn anticipated the textures, waves crashing foam-fingered, sand shifting like time. "I'll describe every grain," Riley promised, eyes sparkling. Evelyn teased. "You already do every day." Challenges came soft, now navigable. A funding snag for the workshops tested patience, but community rallied auctions of Evelyn's maps. Riley's song downloads raising some swift as spring thaw. In resolution they danced in the greenhouse, bodies swaying to imagined fiddles, joy a buoyant force. Clara joined for the first harvest, basket brimming with zucchini and stories. "This place hums with you too," she said, hugging them both. Evelyn felt it true, the cabin, once echo of loss, now chorus of becoming. Evenings brought bonfires, sparks ascending like prayers. Riley's songs invoking ancestors womenhood tilled unyielding soil, loved against odds. As summer crested, they hosted a festival of their own. Lanterns strung in the garden, tables laden with pies and potlucks, voices rising in circle songs. Evelyn spoke, voice carrying. "Light comes not despite darkness, but through it, woven in voices, hands the stubborn green of hope." Applause blended with crickets, Riley's kiss sealing the words. The ending lingered open, a horizon inviting. They spoke of permanence, a commitment ceremony under the oaks, rings etched with fern motifs, but more of futures unbound. Travels to Portland reformed, collaborations with distant creators. Love as salvation had illuminated not just hearts, but horizons. One twilight, as fireflies danced like living stars, Evelyn and Riley sat entwined on the bench, the garden breathing around them. "What now?" Evelyn murmured, head on shoulder. Riley's reply was a hum, then words soft. "Everything. In light we make." The darkness held no terror, only depth. The voice in the garden had become chorus eternal. Rebirth complete, they stepped forward, hands linked, into the warm, hopeful glow.